I've got a couple of these Hornby train controllers there. Old ones are 965s and they have the normal sort of controls. That's power, wind it up, wind it down, and also forward and reverse with the central off position. And it comes with this sort of connector at the end. You can unplug it, and underneath that is the more modern day connector that Hornby give you, and that will plug directly into a power track. But with these connections, they plug into two little holes, little slots that are made in the track. So on this piece of track, they're just about there. So slide them in, and of course the metal connections make contact under the rails, like that. So here I have my track connected up, and this is going to be 2 loops. Now, with only one power controller, I would have a problem with DC analog, because these are insulfrog points and normal points, and as I flick the point over, or turnout as it's sometimes called, the power is fed down this part of the track. It's also fed all the way back round the loop, so this track is still live, assuming there's no breaks in the connections. So the power now goes down here, and if I flick this point over as well, it feeds it nicely onto this loop and all the way around up to here. The problem is, if a train runs over here, it'll straighten up that point as it goes and immediately lose power, because it's now broken the electrical connection on DC analog. So what we need to do to get this all to function off of one controller is to add what's called a link wire across here and just jump the power over from there to there. So this is the Hornby Link Wire, and I'm sure there's many other products on the market that do a similar thing. And as you can see, it works on the same principle to the track connections. These wires simply plug in, and then the connections will slip under the track. So here we have the connections, and as you can see, the power from this line runs through this wire round here and onto this line. So these 2 lines will be the same, positive or both negative, whichever they are. And that is correct, because if you follow it along, when this point is made and the other one's made, that track would be that way round. And you can tell if you've got it wrong, because as soon as you switch on the power, the controller unit will short out and cut out. So you have to unplug it for 10 seconds, swap these connections around, just do that, and then it'll work. So I'm now going to demonstrate with my sci-fi train what happens without the link wire attached. So we've just got power coming in through here onto this outside lane of track, and what happens is I can give it power all the way up to here. It goes quite nicely. I can put it in reverse, but as soon as I switch this insulfrog point over, it's got no power. I'm turning the power up and down and it can't go, and that's because I've disconnected the electrical connection here. In fact, if I switch it back on, it will now go, but of course it's going to drive back down that track. So that is why I need to jump the power over to make this inside track live too. Make sure the connections are pushed in fully and there's nothing come out. So the power from this outside lane here is going through to this lane here, which is correct. That means these two nearest to the camera will be the same, either positive or negative. So let's see if that actually works. So there we have the train on the track, and it has got power. I can flick these points and it's got power on each track. Now the thing is, ideally you might solder these wires on to the tracks and make it a neater thing, or just make sure these wires are tucked under the track nicely so they don't foul up on any locomotives. So there we are. If you've only got one controller, you can connect up 2 loops this way on DC analog. Of course, with digital you can use a different set of points, a different set of connections on the points, and it will be powered up anyway without the need for these. But I presume these would work if that was just a digital power input anyway. But what this does with analog is it gives both loops the same amount of power at the same time. So any trains on these loops will move in exactly the same way. If you want independent control of each loop, then you need 2 controllers, and I would suggest you put insulated fish plates here, which are plastic fish plates just at this join, and that then completely separates electrically the 2 loops. And then when you drive a train over from one point to the next, as long as the controllers are pointing the electricity and the drive the same way, the train won't short out, it will just take over from one loop to the other. But that's if you're using 2 controllers. So I hope that helps give you some tips. If you're running on a budget and you've only got one controller, a link wire, which costs about £5 or £6, can get your second loop powered up.